All right, let's get into it. Today we're talking about the end of an era for a piece of software that for so many people was just there, an invisible foundation for all their work. This is the story of Ingress-NGINX and its quiet final commit. You know, this quote is the perfect way to start. Because this story, it's not about some huge dramatic failure or a big scandal. It's about something way more subtle and honestly kind of more profound. It's about what happens when a tool we all depend on simply stops. So before we can really talk about the end, we've got to talk about what it was. Ingress-NGINX was never the flashy new thing. It was the complete opposite. It was a silent, dependable workhorse of the entire Kubernetes world. And this idea of a digital traffic cop is probably the best way to think about it. For literally millions of apps running on Kubernetes, Ingress-NGINX was that calm person standing at the busiest intersection on the internet, just pointing every single request exactly where it needed to go, day in, day out, no fuss. And that right there was its superpower. In this world of incredibly complex systems where everything is always changing, Ingress-NGINX was the one thing you could set up and pretty much forget about, because it just worked. And that rock-solid stability, that's exactly why its quiet departure is making such loud waves right now. So when the end came, it wasn't some huge bombshell. It was calm, it was orderly, it was almost understated, which, feels fitting for the tool itself, but also really jarring for the huge community that relied on it. The final notice basically read like a project manager's checklist. Yep, final versions are out. A critical security flaw? Patched. Support is officially ending with this version of Kubernetes. But that last bullet point, repository to be archived. Oof, that's what made it feel so final. This wasn't a sudden collapse. This was a planned, deliberate goodbye. This one comment from the community just captures the whole mood perfectly. There's this genuine gratitude mixed with a real sadness. It's the kind of thing you'd say about a trusted colleague who's retiring, not, a piece of software. It just goes to show you how important this tool really was to people. And of course, news like this lands differently depending on who you are. The reaction wasn't one single thing. It really fractured into 3 totally different perspectives, and each one tells a part of the story. So the community's response basically split into 3 camps. First, you had the long-time users just expressing pure gratitude. Then you had the pragmatists, the ones who saw this as the totally predictable result of maintainer burnout. And then you had the confusion, people who mistakenly thought the entire concept of Ingress was ending. This comment, as blunt as it is, really highlights the tension. It was aimed at all those people who are caught completely by surprise. Because look, if you were following the project closely, you could see the writing on the wall for a long, long time. But for everyone else, it felt like it came out of nowhere. Which, of course, brings us to the big question. If this tool was so beloved, so functional, why on earth would you shut it down? Well, the answer has almost nothing to do with the code itself. The real reason is, well, it's a lot more human. This wasn't a technical problem that somebody needed to solve. It was a story about the sustainability of the very system that builds our digital world, open source. We have this romantic idea of open source, right? We picture this massive community of volunteers, all happily pitching in. But the reality for so many critical projects, Ingress-Engine included, is that a tiny, tiny group of maintainers ends up carrying almost the entire burden. And eventually, that burden just becomes too heavy. And this is the uncomfortable truth at the absolute heart of this whole story. You can download the software for free, sure. But the human effort, the sheer hours of reviewing code, fixing bugs, planning for the future, that has an enormous and often totally uncompensated cost. Ingress-NGINX didn't fail. It just ran out of human energy. So with Ingress-Engine on its way out, what's next? Well, the community has a designated successor, but the path forward? It isn't exactly a walk in the park. The official replacement is something called the Gateway API. You can think of it as a much newer, more modern rulebook for how to manage traffic in Kubernetes. It's designed to be more formal, more standardized, and way more powerful. On paper, it's a clear step up. But here's the trade-off. What Ingress-NGINX gave everyone was this beautiful simplicity. The Gateway API, while it is way more flexible, is also just more complex. That extra flexibility is great. You can do more powerful things like letting different teams manage their own routes, but that power comes at the cost of a much steeper learning curve. And this is the reality for the teams who actually have to do the work. Moving to a new system like this isn't just a simple upgrade. It is a major project. It means rewriting configurations from scratch, retraining whole engineering teams on new concepts, and revalidating every single part of your system. Every one of those steps introduces risk. But if we zoom out a bit, the end of Ingress-NGINX tells us something much, much bigger about the world of Kubernetes. This isn't just some isolated event. It's a symptom of a platform that is, well, it's growing up. What we're really seeing here is evolution in action. Those early, scrappy, get-it-done tools that got the ecosystem off the ground, they're not being replaced by more structured, more formal solutions. And this move from that just works simplicity to more powerful, standardized complexity, yeah, it can be painful, but it's also a sign of a healthy platform that's building a foundation for the long term. The shift away from a tool like Ingress-NGINX really represents a fundamental change in how we think about infrastructure. We're moving away from an era of simple, good-enough solutions to one that demands more expertise, more planning, and frankly, more collaboration. It's a cultural shift just as much as it is a technical one. And so, this incredibly important chapter in the history of Kubernetes closes just as quietly as it began. Not with a bang, just a final commit. And that leaves us with a really important question to think about. As our technology gets more and more powerful and our ecosystems mature, is there still a place for this simple tool that just works? Or is complexity just the unavoidable price we have to pay for progress?